It could. The whole thing got rolling when Courtney Anderson talked to me and said, when I was visiting him at Bethany Nursing Home, have you been to Israel? And so I said, no, I've never been to Israel. So we had some conversations about that. And so it started with some conversations with Courtney and then snowballed from there. When I had talked at the adult class that was planning on doing that trip, and the trip we planned, I found out about through a website of the Great Passion Play. That's a passion play like much extremely more developed and such. We tried a little bit for Good Friday, but there's a passion play in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and on their website they've got the advertisement for this trip to Israel. And so I saw that and I thought the price was pretty good. And the intent with this trip with Israel is all about the places that Jesus had been to. There's no emphasis on Paul in this Israel trip. There's not an emphasis on other sort of archaeological sort of things. It's all about sites and places where Jesus was. And so that was, the whole thing was revolving around going to the places in the Bible, for example, where Jesus did the Sermon on the Mount, or where Jesus changed water into wine, where Jesus met the Samaritan woman at the well. And so all those places we went to and got a little picture of in our minds now of those places. So the six of us left on April 13th actually, and went from Omaha to Houston, and then on the 14th we flew with the group to Germany, Frankfurt, Germany, and then from Frankfurt to Tel Aviv. This is coming into the airport in Tel Aviv, the Tel Aviv airport, and so you can see Allison, Colleen, and I think Gary and Judy are up there a little ways further. So I was surprised, I don't know if the other 5 of you were surprised at how much English is on signs there. It's not all, Aramaic or Hebrew, but there's a lot of English words so that they presume that there's going to be a lot of English-speaking people there. That's looking out the first night in Tel Aviv, and that's the Mediterranean Sea. We're looking at the Mediterranean there. And that night we went down and collected a few seashells and that kind of stuff on the Mediterranean, which was kind of fun. So we waited in the Mediterranean that night, but we got there kind of late, so we didn't have any time to really do anything there. The next morning we left bright and early and went to the Sea of Galilee. And that's where the first 3 days of our trip was, at the Sea of Galilee. And so I should have had a little spot thing, but if you see, Sea of Galilee is right up there, and that's the Mediterranean. It would be all this way. Sea of Galilee is there. The Jordan runs through the Sea of Galilee, and then the Jordan goes all the way south to the Dead Sea, where it ends. We spent a little time in the Dead Sea as well, just one afternoon. But the first 3 days we were at the Sea of Galilee, and the Sea of Galilee is where Jesus spent most of his, not most of, but a great percentage of his ministry, because at the Sea of Galilee, on the north end of the Sea of Galilee, as you can see, is Capernaum. There's also all these other places around the Sea of Galilee. Of course, he was on the boat in the Sea of Galilee when he invited Peter to come out walking on the water with him. He was on the Sea of Galilee when the storm was going like crazy and the disciples were worried they were going to die, and Jesus said, "Peace, be still." That was on that sea. And so we were on a boat, as you'll see in a little bit, out in the Sea of Galilee, and enjoying the sights of around that sea. Nazareth is just, as you see, a little bit to the west. Cana of Galilee is a little bit to the west, just north of Nazareth a little bit there. So we went to those towns as well. And so that is the Sea of Galilee, and it is a place called the Primacy of Peter, they call it. So, sorry, the other 5, just jump in and just interrupt me, please. I gave them a microphone too and said, here, talk, whenever I am saying too much. Yeah, Colleen says, take a breath. Okay. You got to.
That's where he stole the rocks.
Yes, that's where, right. Well, in my office, I got a bag of rocks, and I just bent down and grabbed a bunch of rocks and put them in my pocket. So I've got the rock that we're standing on there, it's real blackish sort of basalt rock from earthquake come up, and in the past there were a lot of earthquakes there, but the rock is small little pebbles like that, and they're all kind of blackish basalt.
Oh, it is on. I was going to say that the sea was high. You can see that it's,
Yeah, high
there was
water
a lot,
there.
yeah, it was a lot of high water.
So this is the place where Jesus, I think this is where Jesus says to Peter, Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Jesus asks Peter that 3 times after Peter, days earlier, a week earlier, had said, I don't know the man. I don't know that man that you're talking about. I don't know him. Denied Jesus 3 times, and Jesus gave Peter 3 chances to say, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. So it was along these shores, I believe, is that right? Where Jesus is asking Peter that question. But there's many, many other times right along these shores that Jesus is with the disciples, maybe calling out the disciples, throw the net on the other side. But this is the Sea of Galilee. And so you can see about the distance there. That's about how far it is. And it's really not a sea. It's a lake. And so Luke is the only gospel that gets it right. Luke calls it a lake, Lake Gennesaret. There's 3 names for the sea: Sea of Galilee, Sea Tiberias, and Lake Gennesaret. And so
13 miles long. The lake, or the Sea of Galilee, is 13 miles long.
Right. Yeah, not like that. So this is, if you're facing this, right behind us would be the Sea of Galilee. This trail going up there, you see a little cave halfway up. This trail going up there, and the top of the hill is where Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount. So we walked up that trail, as you'll see in a little bit. We're going up that trail. That cave is a cave. We're going to stop it, and you're going to see the picture from inside that cave, is where they say Jesus spent all night long praying before he gave the Sermon on the Mount. So before he tells the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, for example, Jesus spent all night in that cave. That's in the cave. So I went and sat in that cave, saw what Jesus would look at. He's looking out. He didn't see the highway there. But the Sea of Galilee is just in the distance. You see it there. And so I thought how awesome it would be to just sit in that cave, knowing that our Lord spent that night praying all night long, sitting there in that very same spot. It was kind of a holy moment. There was a lot of holy moments there. So that is in the cave looking out. That's going back down the trail from the top of the Sermon on the Mount there.
I said Aleph did it.
Yes, and all 6 of us went up it?
It was an act of faith getting up there. An act of faith.
So right there where those people are gathered, that's where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. I don't remember, what's that rock? There was some significance, I think, to that. Do you remember?
I don't know about that one, but there's one over on, I don't know about this particular rock in the front, but there is one over by those 2 trees that has the Beatitudes carved into it.
Okay.
And those trees have stickers on them, and that's the type of tree that was used to make Jesus'
Crown of
crown
thorns.
that
They're
stuck
not
on his
very,
head.
it's a branch you don't want to just grab a hold of.
No, and I actually got stuck by it too.
Also, and Jacori, he's the young man standing in the middle there. While we were up there, he read the Beatitudes, and that he is a pastor down in Oklahoma, and that was so powerful, I think. that he read that while we were up on top of there.
One thing that I've sometimes wondered, and maybe you've wondered it, maybe not, but I'll just share it anyway. Matthew says the Sermon on the Mount. Luke gives the sermon on the plain, on the flat place. So you look in the Gospel of Luke, and it's not Sermon on the Mount. Let me go back. Okay, so if you see where the power pole is up on top of the hill there, Jesus was up on that hill at some point, and if you go down, we're down to the flatter place along the Sea of Galilee. So it was a mount to get up to, but it's a flat place once you get up there. And so the Sermon on the Mount is sermon also on a place that's flat at some point as well as Sermon on the Mount. So if he came down, it says he came down to a flat place. So there's the coming down from that hill there to this place where those people are standing. It's flat, and it's a place where Jesus could speak to the people in a little flatter sort of space. So that, for me, kind of helps to okay, that makes sense. I can put the two together now. Before I kind of wondered, how come in one's flat and the other one's the top of the mountain? So. Capernaum, so we went to Capernaum, and that's just a stone's throw or maybe a quarter mile from where the Sermon on the Mount is. Capernaum is the city where Jesus spent most of his time in ministry. That's where he lived during a lot of his ministry. And where he lived was in Peter's house. And we'll see that in a little bit. And right now, Peter's house is covered up with a really modern sort of looking spaceship type building, but it's got a glass floor, and you can stand in that building. It's a worship place, it's a sanctuary, but it's got a glass floor. You can look down into Peter's house, the ruins of Peter's house, which is really not Peter's house, but his mother-in-law's house. Peter lived in his mother-in-law's house. It wasn't a big deal allowable for women to own property so much, and so it was not recognized as her house, but Peter's house, because he was male and she was, a woman, so, unfortunately. So there on the north end of the Sea of Galilee is Capernaum, and in Capernaum, that's the synagogue that was built, I'll see the next frame there, 4th century A.D. I'm going to back up again. 4th century A.D. is the whitish, sort of yellowish colored block. The block underneath that is the foundation of the synagogue where Jesus preached at when he was 30 years old. When he began preaching as, in his hometown, it says he came and opened the scriptures and began preaching to them. That was the synagogue where Jesus was, and we're going to see it inside there a little bit. But the yellow stone, that was built on top of the synagogue where Jesus was in the 4th century. So a lot of, when we're in Israel, a lot of stuff is built on top of and covered up over where Jesus was.
I think we're so fortunate that we are on this particular tour, because not only did we have a great, what's the word I want? Guide, thank you, with the biblical knowledge. His name was Habib, but we also had Gary Crosland, who had done so much historical, even got into some sites, and so we had both the history and the biblical knowledge put together, and that really helped explain a lot, I think, and I think we were very fortunate to be on that trip for that reason.
Habib, from Israel, Arab, but a Christian Arab, and deep faith, knowledge of Scripture that just is fabulous. I mean, his handle of Scripture was awesome.
One thing I was really surprised, I guess had no clue, that only 1% of the people in Israel are Christians.
Yeah, 1%. And Habib explained that a little bit when he said, when you're born into a family, you have to be what your family of origin is. So if your family was Jewish, you have to stay Jewish. If your family was Muslim, you stay Muslim. And so very few people change from Jewish or Muslim to Christian, and if you do, you are disowned. And so when Jesus says in Scripture, if anyone loves father or mother, brother or sister more than me, so he's talking about in a culture where leaving your family and going to a different religion is not so easy like it is here. To go to a different religion, it is like you are now nobody to us, and worse than that. So here's the synagogue, that foundation, just the foundation of where Jesus was, built upon the synagogue of Jesus. There's ruins of Capernaum where houses used to be. Capernaum was not lived in or recognized for some time, and then they discovered it, and then they unearthed some of the ruins, and so they got to where they saw all these rooms and that sort of thing. The thing in the background is what's covering Peter's house, and that's the really modern sort of looking thing. But if you look underneath it, you can see the rooms and such where Peter lived. And there's the ruins of the place where Jesus spent a lot of his life, where his bedroom probably was, or, those sort of things in Peter's house. Above it, you can see that rock that's kind of, more modern sort of looking. And so we're looking underneath that building. There's more of it underneath that building. Who knows, kitchen area, dining area, bedrooms, I don't know. It's the house where Peter was, and Jesus lived, he just lived there. Like if you had somebody, Deb, like when your brother came to live with you, and, he was there all the time, and so he probably had a room of his own, and that's kind of how it was for Jesus. This is the Sea of Galilee again, just a stone's throw from where Peter's house was, like walking from here to Scooters to the Sea of Galilee. So from Peter's house where Jesus lived to the Sea of Galilee, you could just walk across the street, and that's about how far it was to the Sea of Galilee. Really close. Just along the shore there. And so there was some docks and so on made along the shore where they park some boats and so on. In the background, in the hill in the background, you can see, we're going to go there in a little bit, but that's where Jesus cast the demon out of the man who was demon-possessed and into the pigs, and ran off that hill, off that cliff into the Sea of Galilee. That's where that happened, and we'll see that after a bit. We went to Magdala. There's a synagogue there, and this tells a little bit about the synagogue. This is there's the synagogue at Magdala, Migdal. The rock that you see, here's our two guides, Gary Crossland and Habib. This rock right here was a rock that was in the synagogue, and it was likely used for the sacrifice of animals. And so the rock is tilted like this, so that when you put an animal on it, the blood would flow off. I'm just really glad that we don't have to do that now, sacrifice and have blood and all that sort of stuff all over. But they would sacrifice an animal, and so that rock was tilted, and you can see it a little more right there. So that's where they would often do that in the synagogue. So here is the synagogue picture of that, and there's a study area, there's all these various areas. And this is probably a couple of miles from Capernaum, I suppose, would you say? The other five of you, or something like that, maybe? It's just around the shoreline, so to speak. More ruins in that little town of there. And here's Jesus with Mary Magdala from that city. And you can see in the tree behind her, you can see a serpent. She was known to have been a demon cast out of her by Jesus. Again, it's in a little chapel area in that city. I wonder, I don't know who that is. You can see the background there of what the land is like around there. It's fairly green. And it's not just the dry, arid like it is by closer to Jericho, which is really dry, barren, and that sort of thing. I didn't get a picture there of you ladies. There was awesome. Yeah, there's a, so ask.
Touching the hem of Jesus.
I didn't get that picture. So there's a picture where the woman who touches the garment, the hem of Jesus, and she's healed of the flow of blood. I didn't get that picture up here. So talk to one of the ladies, and they've got it on their phone. They'll show you that. And what they did is there's a picture where it fills up like front of the church here. It shows Jesus just from here down in the garment, and this hand reaching out to touch his garment. And so what they did is they had all the ladies who would like to just show them touching then they took it so it looked like they were touching the hem of Jesus' garment. You can get that later. This is in Cana of Galilee, where Jesus turned the water into wine. Of course, it's a more modern sort of building, but it is that space where that wedding was in Cana, and Jesus attended that wedding. This is some of the ruins in there. And so all the buildings that you see are more modern. So and now and then they give you a place where there's excavation and ruins are unearthed and all the dirt taken off. And they say that our guide was explaining every 7 years, what was it? There was about, I forget, 7 inches of soil for every 1,000 years or something like that? No.
Did you say
Do you remember?
when we went down into Jacob's Well, each step was 3?
Yeah, so they said basically how much over the years when things get covered up and so that you can't see the buildings from before. You remember that?
I don't know, I don't remember about right there, but when we went down into Jacob's Wells, there was something about the number of steps, and each step stood for 300 or 400 years or something.
Yeah, like a
So that
step
may-
for every 300 years. So after
So by the
2,000
time-
years,
Yeah.
be like 7 steps. Thanks, Alice. This is an example, or maybe it might have been the actual, I don't know. But this is, that you see the glass around it, one of the jars that water would have been held in. It doesn't look like a jar. They were not jars that you just pick up out of the kitchen and carry into the dining room, but they were massive, massive, heavy jars that probably would not have been moved. And so here's the jar from a top view. And so when Jesus turned the water into wine, the water was in these jars, and then holding about 80 gallons or something like that. So they're massively heavy, big things, not just a little pitcher you move onto the table. And so we're going to go down to where the angel came to Mary and said the Annunciation, announcing Jesus' birth. And so this is the place where where it is believed that Annunciation happened. We're going down into lower space there. That picture that you saw right there, I think is above to the side of these steps going down. So a lot of times we're just standing in line waiting to go somewhere to see something.
Descend.
Yeah, to descend.
Yeah.
Right. And so there we're descending down, and there's the picture up front there. And so that's where the Annunciation happened. This is where, let's see, remember?
That's the Basilica of the Annunciation.
Okay, of the Annunciation. Yeah. Blessed are you among women, Mary, and so on. So again, a big, more modern building over the top of what was there at some time.
They said this was the largest church all about Mary, and there was just all kinds of pictures of Mary inside of it. It was pretty cool.
Yep. So where you see, this is inside that building, inside that church, where you see ahead, those altar boys or priests are at an altar up there. That's where we believe Mary was when the angel came to her. That's what is held to be believed, and so they built a church over the top of this to celebrate that Annunciation. So it's more, I don't know how to say it, but so that's a picture more closer, where it's more, see it close up. And we went also not only to where Mary was lifted up and talked about and celebrated and so on, but also where the Joseph was too. And so the Church of Joseph. Is there anything that you want to remember? Some of this stuff is well, that since I remember it. There's Gary and Judy.
And most of these churches, like this was the most modern, but some of them have been built 2 or 3 different times because during the historical period with the Crusades and the different wars that happened, they get demolished and then they get rebuilt again.
Yeah. Demolish, rebuilt, demolish, rebuilt, demolish, rebuilt, over and over and over again.
Like some of the churches or the buildings were hundreds of years old, and unlike around in the United States, if a building gets old, we just tear it down and build another one. But a lot of them are many, many years, hundreds of years old.
I'm trying to remember where this is now. Same place?
Is that in Joseph's house?
Joseph's, and maybe Joseph's house. So probably in Nazareth, where that church, Mary and Joseph's, those chapels, those churches were in Nazareth. And this, I think, maybe in the house. Yeah, okay, this is the house where Joseph and Mary were at. A lot of the houses were just kind of caves.
There are many, that's what impressed me about Israel, and it wasn't just around the Sea of Galilee or Nazareth. There's caves everywhere. So I have no doubt that Jesus was born in anything other than a cave, because I mean that's what they used for barns, for houses, for worship. There's just caves everywhere.
And so that's again in that house?
That is Mary and Joseph's house where Jesus grew up,
Right,
isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, where Jesus grew up, where he's a little boy.
Yeah.
In Nazareth. So, and some of it was roped off and such where you couldn't go quite everywhere, but
Isn't that also the building where some of you went down and kind of looked where Joseph, wasn't it Joseph was buried, but they wouldn't let you go in there too far?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't go down there, but
Okay, so in Nazareth, and Mary, Joseph, Jesus as a little boy, and we're at where there's a not a monastery, nunnery, and so one of the sisters there shared some information with us that we didn't quite understand the whole time she was talking, but anyway, she shared about Jesus and mom and dad when Jesus was growing up as a little boy.
We weren't supposed to take pictures.
Yeah, a lot of times they said, can't take pictures here. So, the synagogue church, the synagogue in Nazareth, and you'll see it, this is the synagogue church in Nazareth, but it's a church synagogue that's built over the original synagogue that Jesus was at when he was in Nazareth, not Capernaum. Remember, there's that synagogue in Capernaum when he's like 30 years old and so, but this is the synagogue where he was when he was 6 and 8 and, when he was Marcus's age. Huh? Right, Marcus? Yeah, when he was your age. That's where he worshiped, was in that. But this is a Byzantine church built on the top of the original. The original was torn down. And so I think, no, there is a place where some of us took a picture where Jesus probably as a little boy stood and maybe at times spoke.
Where the lady's head was.
Where the
Where
ladies,
that lady's head is and probably, and just in the middle of.
yeah, in the middle of the floor there.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably about the spot where
Yeah.
Jesus.
That was our tour group
Yeah.
that we were with, just so.
Yeah, that was all the people that we were with. There was about 50 to 60 of us.
50
58, because there was 2 missing.
Okay.
Not missing, lost, they didn't make the trip.
We did lose somebody, but.
We found them.
So another city around the north edge of Galilee. There's kind of a triangle between Bethsaida and Chorazin. Chorazin up here, Bethsaida there, and Tabgha there. Gennesaret over here. Magdalene was here. Here's Capernaum, about in right there is Capernaum. So just a lot of the area where Jesus spent his ministry, where the feeding of the multitude happened along the Sea of Galilee at this site, where Jesus was teaching and then fed the 5,000 or the 4,000. Kersey is another town that where Jesus was on the east side of Galilee. I'll just read it from a little bit what I've got. Is identified with Gergesa, or with the land of the Gadarenes, where Jesus cast the demon out of the man who was demon possessed and into the swine. So that's the hill that the pigs ran off of when just up. I think there's a little more, you can see the rockiness of it.
Linda has no spot.
Oh,
Yeah. I was just going to say that there's still wild boars that live there, they said, and there used to be a monastery up there, and the ruins are there.
That's what those ruins are down below.
Yeah.
So that is on the east shore of Galilee. And earlier when we were standing by Capernaum, you could see these hills off in the distance. Chorazin is one of the cities where Jesus did some miracles, and he cursed that city, and he said from now on, the city will no longer thrive. It will be desolate. And it's nothing other than ruins there. So wherever we went, there's tons of stuff to read. Didn't have a chance to read it all, so this is the ruins of the city of Chorazin. In the background, far back there, you can still see the Sea of Galilee. It's probably a few miles from the Sea of Galilee. City of Chorazin. A couple times you hear that referred to. It looks like they're trying to rebuild the city a little bit and to shore it up and strengthen it. But the walls, and where there was a synagogue there, and Jesus did some preaching and some miracles there. Now we're out on the Sea of Galilee. We're in a boat similar to like what's out there, maybe not exactly what's out there, but we're in a fairly good-sized boat floating out on the Sea of Galilee. There's our boat. And we had a praise worship service out on the Sea of Galilee. And what a moving thing to be worshiping and praising Jesus right where Jesus was with his disciples, floating in a boat, fishing, or, walking on the water. And so
I would say that probably was one of my highlights of the trip, knowing that we were on the same water that Jesus was on, that we know was the water, that Jesus was on. Some of the other buildings and things, we said, yeah, this might be the spot where this took place, but no.
it was called the Faith Boat. So I've got a shirt that they sold that said "Sailing in Faith." But anyway, so that was a very moving time. Somebody found the remnants of what they believe was a part of a boat, the same era that Jesus sailed in with his disciples, and this was what's left of it. But they tried to keep it intact. It probably would have collapsed if they hadn't done a tremendous amount of work to keep it intact, but here's the remnants of the boat that probably, the mystery of the 2,000-year-old boat. Whom did this boat belong to? Jesus and his disciples? To the fighters of the Migdal battle, the fishermen of the Sea of Galilee. But there was probably 60, 80 boats like this on the Sea of Galilee. And so, 1 in 80 chance that this is the boat that belonged to Peter. Or something like that. So, this is some of the terrain, some of the greenery, just fairly lush in certain places, like around South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota here. Pretty nice area. A lot of banana trees, fig trees, groves, and so on. Now we traveled south and west to where we went up this really, really high mountain where Jesus and the disciples, where Jesus was transfigured. His appearance changed. He became and so they built a church right over the top of this place. And so Jesus is the picture up in the chapel up there. Jesus being transfigured, that's Moses and Elijah on the cloud next to Jesus. And then it's Peter, James, and John off to the right and the left side there. So it's a site that remembers that event of the transfiguration. A little closer up, Moses and Elijah, Peter, James, and John. And so this is on top of that hill looking in the distance. What Jesus would have seen as he just looked out, Peter, James, John would have seen as they look out in the distance and see the far, far away. The valley down below. Any other thoughts from that?
That valley have a name? I don't remember.
I don't remember if that valley has a name or not.
That's one of the things that surprised me is I always thought the whole country of Israel was kind of rocky and desolate kind of stuff, but it was beautiful around the Sea of Galilee. I mean, just absolutely beautiful. A lot of farm ground, and it was very, very pretty.
Jim?
Do they use irrigation there?
Yes, they do, almost exclusively.
You can see the crop circles.
Yeah.
Irrigation, yep.
Back in Jesus' day, it probably was a lot like you and I think it was. But they brought water into that environment and it's green.
A lot of drip irrigation. In fact, most of it was. The pivots were unusual. Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole agricultural area was covered in net or plastic.
Yeah, so you see this field, whole field will be covered in this plastic sheet. Yeah.
Well,
Keep it in. Protect it from the birds that came and
Pests and- yeah.
pests that got the fruit.
do you have any pictures of that? We've got some pictures of it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. They are like tents, huge, huge tents.
Yeah,
A
this-
lot of crops were under those tents.
30-acre tent.
Miles and miles and miles
Yeah.
of tents.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the bananas would be covered in these blue plastic things. And so our tour guide said, you know why the blue plastic is over the bananas there? He said, because they ran out of the white ones.
Yeah. Well, that might be true in South America. They're white.
Okay, this is Tiberias. Now, we traveled a bunch. So from the Transfiguration to this site is quite a distance. I don't know, 10, 30 miles. Gary Crossland standing by himself in the distance there. He's standing in the room where King Herod Antipas was having a party, and he said to his wife Herodias, his brother's wife actually, that John the Baptist was accusing them, saying, you're having an adultery with your brother's wife. And so Herod had a party for his birthday or something. I think it was for his birthday. And his wife's daughter danced for him. Apparently it was very seductive and so on. And Herod said, I'll give you whatever you want because you dance so well. And so she says, I want the head of John the Baptist. Remember that story. So that's the room looking in right there where Herod was having his party with those folks in that day and gave John the Baptist's head.
Tour guide.
That the tour guide is standing there, yeah.
And then the prison where John the Baptist was located in Tiberias, too.
Yeah, in Tiberias. Tiberias, from Capernaum, you look from, across the Sea of Galilee. Tiberias is on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, so is this, and Capernaum was on the Sea of Galilee, Tiberias. So they were just kind of across the sea, maybe 5 miles or so, or less. More of the ruins of, and this is old Tiberias, where these ruins are, all these ruins. And then now it's a modern city. Okay, now we go to, jumping a whole bunch here, to where the lepers, 10 lepers were. Alice?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to tell you. That's
Okay,
where the 10
go ahead.
lepers were. Well, you're doing fine. But the one man way over by the pitcher,
On the right side?
he's the one that told us all about, this was it was an Orthodox church. I don't remember, Greek Orthodox, right? And he was telling us the story, but Habib had to translate what he said to us. And Habib's the one in the middle. And then Gary Crossan was the other guy.
He spoke in Armenian, and there's how many families? 5 families left in that city that are Christian. Like 8 people maintain this. So they were so happy to see us. And
They rely on offering.
yeah,
And it was just, you can see how ornate it is, the coloring and the gold looking and.
A lot of icons in that church.
That's where the lepers were.
The 10 lepers were healed, and they, back in there is kind of, and they dug around it what was a cistern. You see that very back wall, and on the right top part, and I'll see if I can see this. No, wait a minute. No, that's not it. So in the right top part, there's a hole that goes up.
Well, supposedly they put food down there for the leopards, but I guess I really liked that part in that little church, but I wish they would have sort of left all the stuff that's in there and had it more original.
Yeah.
In my mind, because that to me, it makes it more real that the leopards would have been there. And then only one comes back to thank Jesus.
So they cover up a lot of things with ornate religious artifacts.
Yeah.
That cover up the original.
That was probably one of the disappointing things for me, was that there was so much of that.
we did see a lot of cisterns too. They used that system
Yeah.
To,
all over the country.
for water, because water is sometimes hard to come by. Okay. Now we go to the Jesus meeting the woman at the well. So you see in the left side of this a picture of Jesus with a woman at a well, and there's a bucket there. These are actually 3 pictures I put all together. So here's one picture, here's the second one, and here's the third one. This right here is probably not the authentic actual jar that the woman at the well probably carried, but very much like it. So it would have been like what she had at the well when she was getting water, and Jesus met her, and it's in John chapter 4. You can look it up. And Jesus has this conversation with a woman. She's there in the middle at noontime, and Jesus has a conversation. Then she goes back and she brings all the people from the city and says, the woman of Samaria, and says, you need to meet this man that I talked to. Maybe he's the Messiah. So this is a church that's built over the well. Now that's when we went down in. There's 2 pictures there. There's Alice drinking on the right side from the water out of that well that Jesus met that woman at. And there's on the left side is the well itself with a pulley, a rope, the bucket. And so all of us got to drink out of that well, and it was fresh, clean, really good water. It was like, awesome. It was cold. When they lowered the bucket down into Jacob's well here, It took forever to get him to crank that back up where we could drink out of it. And he said, now listen, everybody be quiet. And he took the water and he poured it in the well. And we waited about 4 seconds for that water to hit the water. It was that deep. We just went, splash. So, but it was kind of quite awesome to be drinking out of the same well where Jesus met the Samaritan woman. On the left, I got a picture with Colleen here, but we also got a picture with Alice and such with the priest, and he's kind of the caretaker of this. Else?
He was a little character that day.
He was.
They said they had never seen him quite like that. But we were all down in by the well, and all of a sudden we're all feeling this wetness coming over us. Well, here he was. He had taken a bottle of water and he was sprinkling it all over.
He was throwing water on us.
So then everybody started having pictures taken with him, and I had mine taken, and I was standing there, and he was bopping his head against mine. I'm kind of going, oh.
Do you have pictures of the inside? He was the artist, actually, that did all of the paintings in that.
Oh, I don't have the
in that
picture
building?
of the artwork in there, but he
It was-
painted them all.
And then also in the picture on the right, there's his
This is a picture
tomb.
that he did up here above his head. That's a picture of him.
And that is where he's going to be buried too. He handmade his casket or his tomb where he's going to be
His
buried.
mausoleum, sort
It's
of.
right
That's where he's gonna be
behind there.
buried.
So he's a Greek Orthodox priest.
Yes, right, Greek Orthodox priest.
So I forget stuff, so previous slide, just a quick question, maybe the next one. All right, we see Jesus depicted in paintings all the time with this halo around his head.
That's a Greek Orthodox thing.
And those 3 letters, what's that mean? Can you help?
Not sure. No, I wonder if the N isn't of Nazareth. Greek Orthodox, a lot of places have, and it's not those particular ones, but it's a phi tau, 2 letters in Greek. The phi tau is a word that is the first 2 letters. Does anybody else remember? But it's words that I couldn't remember. I didn't write them down. But it has some significance for the Greek Orthodox. I don't know. Paul, you were there. Do you remember what that? No? Okay. Maybe Jerry would remember, but I can't remember it. Yeah. So phi is like a circle with a line through it. And the tau is a Greek, that's a letter like PH in Greek. The tau is a letter, is a capital T, and that's the Greek letter for T. And it is first two letters meaning have some significance in the Greek Orthodox Church. Now we're going down. Here's steps to down into where Jesus was born. Is this we're at Bethlehem, or I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, it would have to be at Bethlehem. That's where he was born. But this is the church called the Nativity.
Yeah, Church of the Nativity.
Yeah.
So we're going down about 7 steps from ground level to where it was. So that's about 2,000 years, and it shows a place where apparently Jesus was born. Here, these candles and this little wire screen is the place where Mary gave birth. Turning around, that's where he gave birth.
Yeah.
And the previous one is where he was laid in the manger. So this is the scene where the manger was, apparently. How exactly they know exactly that's where the manger was, but that's what's believed, understood. So the manger scene, and then around back, and this is where Mary gave birth to Jesus.
You maybe are wondering, why do we have all of that stuff around our necks? Well, we had our name tags for one thing, but then we also had a little box where, and we had earphones there were some places that, well, a lot of places where they would say, put your earphones in, because our tour guide would be talking, and then there would be a lot of people around, so we could hear him talking no matter where we were.
So you didn't have to crowd around the speaker. You could hear him.
And
You
there
could be
was-
across the room, and you could hear him speak.
And there were also some places he said, I cannot talk in here, or I have to wait because of it being a holy place. Yeah.
So this is also in Bethlehem, where they believe that Mary and Joseph lived in very cave-like. What's that, Jim?
Caves everywhere.
Yep. What's it? They call it the milk house, or
Milk grotto, that's where some of her breast
Milk
milk
grotto.
spilled on the rocks.
yeah. And so they say that if you get some shavings off those rocks, it's therapeutic.
Isn't this where they hid before they left for Egypt?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. This is, you see in the right picture, and the left picture up above the little canopy there, and the right picture is close up, where the angels come, and this is the shepherd's field. This is where the angels came to the shepherds just outside of Bethlehem. And of course, they built a church over the site where the shepherds were. So this is inside that church. Really gorgeous colors, amazing colors to this inside. And again, it's a Greek Orthodox church. You can see by all the icons and so on. Pictures. Then we went from the Shepherd's Church to the Mount of Olives, the Chapel of the Ascension, where they believe Jesus ascended after resurrection. 50 days after the resurrection, then he ascends, Acts chapter 1. And so this is the chapel they built over the site where Jesus ascended, apparently. So on the left picture, that's the Garden of Gethsemane. The right picture, of course, is the chapel that's built on that site. Everywhere in Jerusalem, the crosses that you see are not generally like we have in the front here. A lot of crosses are like this one. And I've got one in the office on the wall now of my collection of crosses. It's called the Jerusalem Cross. It's 4 tau crosses, not with a cross where the top stands above, but it's just a big, like a capital T, and put together with 4 little smaller crosses on the outside. They're called the Jerusalem Cross. You see those all over Jerusalem.
I have a necklace like that with that design, but then it opens up and there's the 4 little crosses across it. Judy has one too. Judy also has a necklace that says Judith in Hebrew, or is it in?
Jesus?
Unfortunately, I can't read it, so I don't know if I have it on right or not, but neither do you.
So we're going into where the Garden of Gethsemane was. This is where, when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, they built a big church over the top of, well, there's the Garden of Gethsemane, a picture of that garden. So now we're inside the chapel, the church where the garden was. And so this is a large rock right here that Colleen and I are putting our hands on in this picture. It's the same rock right here. This rock, they explained, and somebody has depicted it with a picture where Jesus is kneeling and he's praying the night before he's be crucified, and he's in the garden praying and praying.
It's
Oh,
in the
yeah,
picture
the
right
back,
above
back
it.
there. You see it in the fresco above the altar. So Jesus is praying, and that's the rock that apparently Jesus was leaning on, praying on when he was sweating drops of blood, saying, Father, let not my will but your will be done. And so before he's crucified. And so just to put our hand on that space, saying, this is where Jesus prayed, saying, God, I'm willing to do your will. holy moment. And there was one gal in our group, she got there, and she was just wailing and weeping with the heaviness of the burden, thinking of what Christ went through on that site. Another picture in the Garden of Gethsemane, just on the edge of Jerusalem. Whoops. So walking through some of the city of Old Jerusalem. A lot of the streets are lined like that with walls on both sides. Gates, there's two pictures there. It's not one picture. Zion Gate, Jerusalem has several gates as you enter the city, and as you look through the Gospels, it says at this gate, such and such happened. A miracle happened here, or at Zion's Gate, or other various gates. So we're just walking through the old city of Jerusalem. Okay, then as we go through the city of Jerusalem, we came to room where the Last Supper happened. This is not the actual room where it happened. Again, torn down, rebuilt, torn down, rebuilt. So this is built over the site where the last room originally was. So we all went into this room. This hall, as you see the letter writing there, was built in the Middle Ages at the place where, according to Christian tradition, Jesus partook of the Passover meal with his disciples just before the crucifixion. So there we're in the room, and I had the privilege of consecrating Holy Communion in the room where Jesus gave his disciples the Last Supper in the Passover.
I thought that was a special moment. I liked
It was for me.
the upper room.
It was for me, too.
This is what we had communion in, little wooden cup.
Yep. He gave everybody a little wooden cup, a chalice.
And I'll have to say one thing, a little humorous, that there were cats everywhere in Israel, everywhere. We got to the airport in Tel Aviv, and there was a cat sitting on an old luggage carousel. I mean, it was like a greeter. And there was actually a cat sitting in that tree-like thing there. There was a cat in that room. They were everywhere.
Yeah. It's like a cow in India.
Yeah.
Like holy or something. I don't know
Yeah.
what. But yeah. This is the Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering that Jesus walked on the way to the cross. Just to the right of this is going to be a building where we will go down into places where probably Pilate held Jesus in prison between the trial and the crucifixion. We'll be in there a little bit. So there's a sign showing Jesus going down this way when Jesus was arrested, brought to Caiaphas, the high priest, being whipped and pulled down that way. There's a statue here of Peter just outside the courtyard there, where Peter said, "I don't know him. I don't know who you're talking about." And so maids or whatever accusing Peter.
You didn't get the rooster at the top.
Oh, sorry. There's a rooster above up there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the rooster was crowing. And so now we're going down into underground caves, parentheses, you see prison. When these underground caves were rediscovered in 1889, their physical characteristics, their proximity to Caiaphas' palace, and their contiguity with the sacred pit, the dungeon, all suggest the public jail where, according to 4th, 13th century Jerusalem tradition, not recorded in the Gospels, Jesus would have been scourged not only by Pilate but also Caiaphas, where the apostles Peter and John would have been held and scourged for preaching the name of Jesus later in Acts chapter 5. So we're going down to where Jesus probably was held in this glassed off area. So you can't get to it, but it's, and so on the outside there you see some ropes like these, and they put those there. There were probably ropes like that where the prisoners would have been held up, their arms tied to the, these are the prison walls, probably. There's a room where a group of people, and they're singing How Great Thou Art, I think it is. And while it's the room where probably Jesus was held, that very room, before he was crucified. And so they're just praising God there. This is the place where
Potter's Field.
Potter's Field, as
The Field of Bloods it was today in the lesson.
That's right. We read about where Judas was hanged, and it's still just a field. Jerusalem's around it, but there's nothing there other than that field. So called the Field of Blood. So you can see down below the caves, like at about a third way from the bottom, there's again some caves there, you know. Another picture of that, overlooking that. This is Jericho, old city of Jericho. We had traveled through Jericho, more modern city, but this is the area that once was the city of Jericho. So we're now quite a ways south of Jerusalem. We've traveled a whole bunch south. That's the Dead Sea in the background there, where you see the hills in the distance. Right outside of Jericho is this mountain where Jesus was tempted. As he began his ministry, and this is a very desolate, dry, barren, deserted wilderness. And so Jesus would have been on top of that hill there when he was tempted by Satan as he began his ministry. Mark and, Matthew, Luke all say the Spirit. Mark says the Spirit drove Jesus out into the wilderness. Matthew and Luke said that the Spirit led Jesus out into the wilderness. Mark has it a little more harsh, as if, I don't want to go, but the Spirit kind of saying, you got to spend these 40 days in the wilderness. So that's more the barrenness. We're driving down the highway, the barrenness of around Jericho, the Dead Sea. That's the Dead Sea in the background.
Did you get a picture of the shepherds out in the...
I did not.
They're actual shepherds that live out there in the desert, and it's so, like in little shacks.
Nomadic herdsmen
And,
that are just
Bedouins.
Bedouins, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know who that is. Who's that?
I don't know who that is, but she has her back to the Dead Sea and the Jordan Mountains, or Jordan's on the other side of those mountains.
Right.
And there was kind of, I don't know if you can see those little white tents over there, and off to this side there was a whole bunch of little tents, and they were actually air conditioned, I guess. There was a bunch of girls down there, like college-age girls, the way it looked to me. And they were staying there. There was a swimming pool and everything, so it was kind of a retreat for them. So it was kind of neat.
They were glamping.
They were clamping, okay.
Glamping. And it's kind of, the Dead Sea, what was surprising to me, it's kind of a resort area.
Yeah, it is. Very much a resortish.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
And how was the swimming there, Gary?
I don't know, I couldn't swim, I was way above the water. You couldn't sink at all.
You absolutely could not sink. No. We went swimming in it, and it was oily. We floated.
Floated, you don't swim.
Yeah, you don't really, you don't want to go underwater there. It is really bad. No, you can't, because you can't get down it. You'll float. You just pop to the top.
Everybody's been in salt water, where you float pretty good. Mm-hmm. Well, this, when you got out, it was just like olive oil. Yeah.
Slimy.
Skin.
Yeah, so salty. And in fact, I was just floating in the water, and I think I had more of me was out of the water than was in the water when I was just floating on the top. It was so buoyant.
And Gary had a hard time getting out. No, we all did. No,
we
but
couldn't get to our feet.
It was like,
because we couldn't
how
put our
do we
feet down.
get out of here once we're up? And we're like, okay, you can't really stand, right?
I thought I was going, not drown. I thought I was going to die because I could not get out of there. I headed for the dock. I thought I could pull myself out, but Pastor Jim saved me.
Just push your feet down and then stand up, and then, it was real rocky, but it was an experience. I'm glad I did it.
And I shouldn't have, but I licked my lips, and it was like eating salt. It's just really, but anyway. I don't remember.
I do.
What?
This is near the Dead Sea, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were done. And this is a staircase going down into one of the cisterns there, and that crack goes all the way down the steps. And that crack happened when the earthquake that happened when Jesus was on the cross and the temple came down. Or that's what they said.
So the earthquake when Jesus was crucified. And there's
Yeah.
other sites there where we see earthquake cracks that attribute to the earthquake when Jesus was crucified. So this is Qumran, right on the Sea of the Dead Sea. Caves at Qumran. And explains it a little bit. Bedouins discovered the cave in August of 1952. If you know a little history of the Qumran village, 14,000 fragments of scrolls were unearthed as they sifted through the dust within. Archaeologists who reached the cave later uncovered an additional 1,000 fragments, and so they are scriptural Bible passages that are just like what we've got in Scripture, only found in 1952, buried in caves, and they believe that they buried them there. Qumran was a village where all they did was copy Scripture. That's their whole job, was just copying Scripture. And so they copied Scripture, and then they buried them because they didn't want anyone who was non-Christian to find these and destroy them. Some sheep herder found them and was selling them, destroying them, and such, sadly. But you can probably Google, I'm sure, Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls and such. This is the ruins of Qumran. And some of them are ruins where they're just like, this was their copy room, this was their dining room, and so on. But dry. This picture is, now we're back to Jerusalem again, back from Qumran up to Jerusalem. This is the corner of the temple, and our guide said that's probably the corner where Jesus was brought to in the temptation when Satan says to Jesus, jump from the corner of the temple and throw yourself off, and if you do, they'll say, yay, what a great, that's a paraphrase. But we're at the Western Wall, or often more commonly known, the Wailing Wall. They don't call it the Wailing Wall so much, they just call it the Western Wall, a remnant of the temple. So there's the Wailing Wall.
And the picture that you're seeing is the man's side of the Wailing Wall. There is another section that just where the women go. They're separated.
Yeah.
And very, very crowded, as Colleen said it was.
I didn't know there was two different sections, and I was walking down the women's section. This lady grabbed me and says, that way. Okay.
You didn't tell her that you were a transgender or anything?
No.
Okay.
Thanks, Alice.
You're welcome.
Holy Sepulchre, of course, the holy place where Jesus was buried. So we went into this church that is, the right picture is a crowd of people, and this was an experience of, I tell you, crowded and pushing and people trying to get their way. Okay.
No, you can go ahead and tell us the experience of the.
I guess I was a little disappointed. This was something I'd really looked forward to, and because it was so crowded and how some of the people acted, I mean, I just felt like we're here for something that is such an experience, and then people are mad because they're not getting in line where they thought they should be. And I mean, if you were claustrophobic, you were in trouble because you were just pushed up against each other. And I have to give a lot of credit to our guide, Habib, because he had a lot of connections, because we thought we really got there early, but there was still so many people. But
Thousands of people.
Yeah, and he was able to keep our group together for the most part and into a good place in line. But we weren't even able to see everything because it just took so long to get in line. And then the bad thing is that was the day we had to leave, so it was kind of like
Rush.
it was a rush, and it was kind of not the good way to end the trip.
On the right picture, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, several times Habib, our Israeli tour guide, he said, quit being so American, because we were very polite and courteous, because that's what we do in America usually. And it's like, you go ahead and go, but the
So just
people
push
that
your
were
way.
not from America were pushing their way through and actually hitting and stuff, so that was the only place where I didn't feel really comfortable in being there.
On the right side of the right picture is just I didn't get it well, just a outside wall of where the Holy Sepulchre is. So we're all going around this circular pathway that around the corner, it's hard to imagine, is an entrance. So, yes, this mass of people is thousands of people. Yeah. This right here is where the Holy Sepulchre is, and it's just this big round space that where the tomb of Jesus, they say, was.
It's kind of a chapel within a chapel. If
Yeah.
that's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah, sunbeam coming right down on people there.
The window at that certain time of the day.
Another picture of it in that crowd. And so they didn't let us, once you get in there, you couldn't take a picture, which was sad. I would have loved to have gotten a picture of the place, and we all got to put our hand on what was presumably the stone where Jesus laid, where his body laid. This is in the same, only up some stairways. The place is a little ways away, up some stairways, and there's a place we're all getting to where the cross was put into the ground where Jesus was crucified on. So in a little bit, we'll see that spot where it's just really under this really ornate altar and ornate building all around it is this little hole under the altar where they say the cross of Jesus went right there, where she's bending down. The gal with us had purple hair, and well, the purple lady, yeah. But she's putting her hand in the hole where the cross went down. And the right side, I'm not sure who that is, under the altar there. Is that you, Alice? I don't know. I'm kidding.
I don't know. No, I don't think so. That ain't me.
Yeah.
Habib got me through there before you came.
Okay. So that's a very ornate, as you can see, the background there with all kinds of candles and such hanging, but person under the altar is just holding their hand or feeling where the cross went in the ground.
It was scary to put your hand in there. I'm not going to lie.
There's the window in the background there looks kind of yellowish rock. That's older rock, and it's got a crack in it. And they put the window over it just to say this crack is here again because of when Jesus was crucified. That crack happened in the earthquake. So I don't know.
Oh.
The pillar behind Colleen there, I think, is that the pillar presumably that they tied Jesus to when they scourged him, when they beat him.
Okay.
Do you remember this room? I forget
This is
what's...
the one where we waited for a long time to go down into, isn't it?
I think so. Can't remember what was in this. Sorry. This is on our picture with Habib, the six of us with Habib. Super nice guy. And that's it. So,
Okay, so did you have enough time?
not really.
Well, we were
Thank you.
rushed. Kai.
It was rushed.
There were a few times, I guess I wish we would have had a little bit more time to just sit and ponder what was actually reflect what was
from here to there, to
actually,
there, to there.
we are here, like where Jesus actually was.
I would have
And-
liked, for example, to sit where some of that stuff was, and the crowd they shove you through like cattle. And I would have loved
Well,
to
but
just
we
sit
were-
there and pray.
We saw a lot. Oh, we did renew our vows at the
Where the wedding of Cana was.
wedding of Cana. Also, some of us got rebaptized again.
Oh, I
in
didn't
the-
get pictures of
in the
Judy's got
Jordan
some of those.
River.
Gary's got some of those.
I know.
Yeah.
Jim and I and
So I got to go. I went
Alice
swimming
and-
into the Jordan River.
The
And
Jordan is not a Missouri River. It's very
No.
narrow.
It's probably not as wide as from that wall to that wall. That's the Jordan River, just narrow.
But that was probably one of my highlights too, of getting rebaptized in where Jesus was
And I
baptized.
thought, I'm going to get baptized again, not because I need to for salvation, but because Jesus was baptized here. So, to be baptized again in the river where Jesus was baptized, saying, yep, that's, so anyway.
I think it was something I didn't know if I'd do or not. I'm very glad I did, but it was kind of difficult because it was at flood stage. So normally you were steps that kind of went right down, and you couldn't see the steps because the water was covering them. So, I mean, they had people going down, but even standing there waiting to be baptized, it was hard to stand still because there was enough of a flow, that it was like, I'm trying to keep my feet, bend your knees. It's like, I'm just trying to stand right now. But it was probably the highlight for me.
Yeah, it was awesome. Bruce?
I have a question. If there's only 1% of the population is Christian, who maintains all of this?
The Catholic Church.
Or the Greek Orthodox and the Catholics.
Well, and even some of the Muslims, wasn't some of those churches involved with
Yeah.
with all three different?
Yeah, so who maintains
Faith.
all that? There's a Christian presence there that makes sure, but also there is a tremendous, tremendous amount of tourism that happens because of this. So I would imagine that the Muslims want to say, we got to keep this up because we're getting lots of money from all these Christians.
Yeah.
Jewish people? Sure. Greek Orthodox, that would be Christian, but who knows who, or is Christian there while you're in the church. They're mostly tourist sort of places.
But it's interesting, tourism is only 6% of the income, which surprised me. I thought it'd be a lot higher than that. The saddest thing I heard was the biggest income was weapons sales.
Weapons.
Weapon sales. Yeah.
And diamonds.
And diamonds, they do a lot with polishing and cutting diamonds there too, was a big.
They gave us brought back those products. Guns, diamonds, no.
We didn't have a picture of the bathroom situation.
Those were
It's disgusting.
Bathroom situation is very interesting.
The hole in the ground?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
a lot of times we had to take our own toilet tissue.
Yeah, there was no toilet paper
Most
there.
of the time, and not real clean at all.
But it was separated by sex.
Yeah.
Most of the time?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sometimes.
And we had to pay sometimes to go to the bathrooms if we were out in the public areas. Yeah, 2 for $1, yeah.
Wayne?
Two people for $1.
Colleen and I would both go in, she'd go her way and I'd go my way, and I paid
$1.
$1. Yeah. Wayne? Presumably.
I
don't know.
can't figure, when we were at the Church of the Sepulchre, maybe Paula or Eleanor have some idea. Most of those, or a lot of those people had head coverings on, like Middle Eastern women do. And so I don't know if they were Christian or not, or if they were just seeing the sights.
Jewish, so,
There's a lot of Jewish, most of the country is Jewish, about 3/4 probably.
And the food, I got pictures of the food.
That was interesting.
I didn't take
There's
pictures of
no
any food.
dogs, so I'm a little worried about the mystery meat that we ate.
They said we had chicken, but lots
no,
of chicken.
No
And
pork, you didn't have bacon for breakfast, that's for sure.
First thing I wanted when I got back to the U.S. is I want a nice big plate of bacon.
We got back to Houston, and that night we ate in our hotel, and we got 2 big meat pizzas.
all meat.
So thanks for your attention. If you have any questions, Gary and Judy, Alice and Linda and Colleen have got other pictures on their phone as well. They shared a few of their pictures with me, but a lot of these are just mine. So I'm not techie enough to get their pictures well and